Welcome to the next video on the Sage Intacct Construction inventory configuration and workflow. In this session, we're going to talk specifically on setting up inventory items and how to set up item GL groups that will allow you in the next sessions to be able to link your GL accounts through your transaction definitions. So let's dive right in. Setting up your inventory items, you're going to do that directly at the top level through inventory control, and you'll go under setup items. So inside the items, there's going to be various drop-down lists that you can code to those items. Things like product lines. There'll be what's called GL groups, some different items you can track on the inventory piece itself. Units of measure we discussed in the original configuration. So a lot of those you can add on the fly or you can add them ahead of time. So one of the first things I want to discuss is let's dive into, for example, product lines. So you can set up a pre-built list of different product lines, and it's most useful in helping you report, filter, and sort on your different types of items within inventory. So these are freeform customizable. I have a few samples set up here like appliances, cabinets, things like that. You can click Add. You can also import, so if you have a big list of product lines, you don't have to key them in manually, you can import them in. But as far as what you're tracking in there, it's really for informational purposes. It's going to have a product line ID, a more detailed description, and you can also link it to a parent product line. So if you have, let's say, electronics, and then underneath electronics, you want to have different types of categories underneath electronics, you can do that with a parent product line, and then whether it's active or not. So as you can see here back on the list, I have a product line for a particular brand of products, and then I have different child product lines, appliances, cabinets that are all linked into the Revive home brands. So that's available, and you can add those on the fly if you have security to do so. The other area you're going to notice in the system is called GL groups. And if you're familiar with the transaction definitions for purchasing and order entry, that setup and workflow is going to follow the same process here. Basically, in your transaction definition is where you're going to map what general ledger accounts are used. So if you have inventory items and you want them to go to a particular inventory GL account, you're going to want to make sure you have a GL group established that's going to allow you to retrieve the GL account that is needed. So with inventory, it's usually a little bit simpler than in the purchasing and the construction area where you have different cost of sales accounts like subcontract materials. In here, most likely you're probably going to be linking to one inventory account or maybe one inventory GL account by warehouse or location. So within the GL groups, you do not need a group for each warehouse or location. We're going to be able to establish that in the transaction definitions in the later session. So typically you're going to have one item GL group in here called inventory, or in this case, because we're already kind of set up here for construction, you can just use the material GL group that's already established in the system because it's going to have different rules based on our inventory transaction definitions. If it was ordered for a particular project, for example, and not going into inventory, it can go to cost of sales material. If it's ordered for stock and it's going through an inventory transaction definition, we can say anything that has material is going into the inventory account. But you can also build a separate one if you want to keep it separate. And again, it's a very simple, just building a list here. We're just naming it and we're giving it a name, and we're going to use it later in the item setup. So let's go ahead and let's go into our items. And what I'll do first is I'm just going to hit the plus button and create an item from scratch. So I'm going to hit the item. The first field that comes up is the item type. And this is a very important field. It's required. And this is going to determine which module it possibly shows up. Is it going to track inventory or not? If you grab your drop-down list, you're going to have some different types here. You're going to have inventory, non-inventory. You might have an item that you want to track in the system but not track inventory on it, so it would be called a non-inventory or non-stock item. You might want one item that you just use through purchasing that you don't want to see on the sales side. I don't need to see 1,000 items on the sales side because I don't sell those items. I just sell these 5, and I want to make those, those would be the inventory items that show up there. In this session, we're going to discuss specifically the item type of inventory. So we're going to come into here and select it as an inventory. And you are going to need to provide an item ID. You don't have a sequence here, an automatic numbering sequence here. If you hit the question mark, it's recommended. Basically, item, department, location, and class IDs cannot be set for auto numbering. So, there's some suggestions in here as far as best practices go, how you want to label those item IDs. When you're searching for items later on, in the workflow, you will be able to search. It will search off both ID and name. So you can, you don't have to be as critical on your IDs. Could just keep a consecutive number as well. But let's just call it IV. We'll just go IV001. And let's, for lack of imagination, we're going to make this a widget. So what I can do is when I set this item up, I can link it to a product line, an existing product line. I can add one on the fly. And we can call it, we'll add one on the fly, and we're just going to call it general inventory. Okay, so I can keep it as simple as that. I'm going to have one product called general inventory. So here, if you remember in our configuration session, we said allow inventory costing method overrides. So you can see here for this item, it pre-filled as average because that's my default inventory valuation method. But I can change it and say, you know what, for this item, it's going to be LIFO, FIFO, and we'll say LIFO in that scenario. You could key in an extended description. You can have that field show up on your purchase orders, etc., instead of just this name field. And here's where you can establish the unit of measure. And again, you want to be able to add your own on the fly. I'm just going to say it's each. And you can add another field here for notes. Any of these fields can be used on reporting or on a form if you need be. So under the inventory section here, we have some miscellaneous fields like shipping weight, auto print labels. This is the critical one here for your general ledger. The GL group needs to be defined at the item level. I would recommend even setting up if you're adding items all the time, I would set up a smart rule here that when a new item gets set up, that this can't be blank. So you can have a smart rule set up so that it gives you a warning or an error if a user leaves this blank when they set up a new item. So in this scenario here, this is where you'd pick from your list. And in this case, I'm just going to use the material as my inventory items. You can track a standard cost on this item. Let's say it typically costs $15. And when we sell it, we're going to sell it for a base price of $30. You can establish all this. We'll get into that in the order entry section. Is this item taxable? And if you need sales tax setup, definitely check out our sales tax deployment training class series on sales tax, and it will kind of go through the setup of the item tax groups and all the detail needed to get sales tax working in your system. I'll set it up as taxable, and it's going to be a taxable item group. So what will happen here is, as these items get established in the system, you could code which warehouse it's going to be stored with. And so I can come into here and say it's for the GC warehouse and the residential warehouse. So you can kind of list that. It will pre-fill it as well as you go along here. So I'm going to leave this blank for now. And anytime you can save it, if there's another field here in the system that is required, it will warn you and not let you save it. So you can go ahead and save that anytime. I'm going to keep going here. So I'm going to go through advanced. And there's some nice features in this screen like substitute items. So, hey, if you're going to issue this item to a job and it's not in stock, do you want to be able to substitute a similar item for that and have it prompt you? So you can link a substitute item. And it should be able to turn on serial number tracking here. And not exactly sure, maybe my settings, we turn that off, but I'll check that again. But if you have that enable serial tracking set up in your configuration, you'll be able to say for this item, we want to track serial numbers, and you could turn that on individually per item. And you can also establish if there is a required serial number masking format that you want to make sure gets keyed in correctly. You can do that here. And then as you go down, you can see there's some other information on the inventory side that we're not going to get into today. On the vendor history tab, you're going to be able to establish whether you want to turn on replenishment for this item. So basically, if you check the box here, enable replenishment, then you'll be able to fill this information out based on what's our method, reorder point, what's the reorder point. We want to make sure we have a safety stock, so we want to make sure we have at least 5 on hand. We want to order when we get down to 8, and we want to reorder 3 at a time. Okay, so you can actually fill all that information in. Maximum order quantity. So, you might suggest ordering a little bit more than maximum, so the quantity is at least the minimum. Basically, you can fill out a max quantity. You don't want to be ordering too much on hand here. So what you can do is you can link, and it'll track the vendor entries as they happen here, but you can link also the vendors that you typically order this from. So if you're reordering, you want to reorder from Buffalo Welding. What's their stock number? Typically, they have a 3-day lead time, and they give you a discount if you order more than 10 or something like that. And their minimum is 3, and that's also each. Okay, so you can fill all that information out in the system. So as far as cross-reference entries go, you can track other item IDs for this item. So for example, if customer calls it something else and you call it this, you can actually say for this customer, when they buy from us, when Wegmans buy from us, their reference item is always going to be 789. And, you can say for this vendor, when we order from this vendor, their cross-reference for this product is 456. And you can kind of use these to show up on the forms as well. And if you need to get into the detail of the item itself, you can actually track a ton of detail as far as item attributes go. You'll see there's a lot of conditions, UPC, require particular approvals. There's a lot of fields you can browse through here and use these, and use them on reporting or smart rules or smart events and all that product. But basically, once you create the item, you're going to click Save. And that item's going to be available to connect into in your system. So if I sort by product line, you can see I got a general inventory item there. And I'm going to go in real quick here in my configuration, and I want to check the serial number on here. And I have a feeling it is because serialization is not available if I select LIFO as my inventory method. So for that widget, I selected LIFO, so it says, well, last in, first out. It's not eligible for serialization. You need to change, if you want to track serialization, that's going to be based on something else here. So we'll change the costing method on that. Anyways, so that's where you can set up an item. We discussed the GL item groups as well. And what we can also do is once you're in inventory, you can always view a list of your items. So if I just click on items instead of hitting the plus button, I can see a list of my items. And what's going to become really handy for you is the ability to create these different types of views. You may want to have views where, you're seeing your reorder points are, about to hit, items ready to reorder, certain product types. So if you can see here, I mentioned I want to see everything that's apparent. So I want to see all the Revive Home Brands items that are linked in inventory. And you can see here I have 3 different types of cabinets, some microwaves. So you can change your views here based on what you want to see. I have one created called Inventory Stock Items. And now this shows me all the items in my system where the item type is inventory. So I don't want to see all my non-stock in this view. And then I also made it available what columns I wanted here. On hand, on hold, so I can get a quick glimpse of what's on hand, what's on hold. I can filter it and sort different ways. I can see that I have 3 microwaves on hand, none on order. So you can track all that information in here. And all it is coming into your views, going into Manage Views, either save a view as, click Edit. And once you get into here, I can select the fields that I want to be available on this view. So you can literally check off any of the fields that we went through in the setup. And you can go all the way down here. And it's just a wizard. So you're going to hit Next. And now it says, all right, well, what order do you want them in? And what do you want to call them? So you can move these up and down. And you can rename them. If you don't want to call it Item ID, you can call it Inventory Item ID. Item name. You can change that description in there. And then you can filter. So I selected any of the columns. And I want to say for item type, I want it to only be where equals inventory. So you can make multiple filters on this view. And then as I keep going along here, how do I want to sort it? I want to sort it by item number. Do I want to sort it by product line, then item number, maybe item type, then so you have multiple ways to sort your information. And then you're going to describe it. And what's really nice is if you click this deploy box here, so if I click deploy and I save it, what that means is that's going to put it on your reporting menu. So if I refresh my screen, and this is good for everywhere, not just inventory. So check these views out all over Intacct. And once I do that and refresh, you'll notice under all for that module, inventory control, you have this custom views. And if I click here, this will show me any custom view you've created in inventory. So instead of going into the item and switching your view, you can just click right on here and it will go into the view you need. You can make any view also as part of a dashboard. So if you create a view that maybe is showing where, on hand is less than 2 of reorder point or something like that, you can have a filter for items that are ready to be reordered just on your dashboard as well. So things like that you can do within the system. First step is to get the items in and get them ready to go so that in the next session we could get the transaction definitions set up so that we can post it through. One other really nice thing is, of course, if you have a ton of inventory items, you don't want to be setting these up manually. You have the ability to import as well into your inventory items, just like you could on the purchasing side. If you were setting up non-inventory, you can download the Excel template, go through those fields, put in your inventory items through there, and then come into here and import the items into the system. And so there's a whole process for that. So those items can be imported in. I recommend setting up a few at first just to get used to the fields and what needs to be in there, and then go ahead and build a template so you can import all those items into the system. That concludes this section of the inventory construction class for Sage Intacct. Join us for the next sessions where we'll dive into the transaction definitions and the setup and configuration there. Thank you.